Sama-sama halina sa INC Radio International na ito palaging konektado ka sa INC Radio nga. Ito INC Radio sa mabaling ng mundo, palaging konektado sa lahat ng mga tao. This is INC Radio, anywhere in the world, we are always together, connected to everyone, life will be better. Dahil na, sama-sama halina sa INC Radio International na ito palaging konektado ka sa INC Radio nga.
This is INC Radio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
The power
Conversation.
it could change your whole life.
INC Radio Chatline. Conversations that matter.
To our live show here on Chatline, where we have conversations that matter. And tonight we will be talking about more on listening to understand. So you might be wondering, why is this important? Well, first of all, when and if, or if and when we communicate with others, it's not only important that we talk, but also to listen. And to my friends here who are with me tonight, my question to you is, why do you think it's important to have a connection when it comes to communication?
That's the question after that. It's on unmute, so I'm gonna answer first.
I unmuted so that I could be ready to go.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. Can you ask the question again? I was also trying to get the chat up and going.
Oh, yeah, sure. So whenever, of course, we communicate with others, why do you think it's important that we have connection in communication? Because right now we will be talking about listening to understand, or listen to understand, right? So when you think about it, when we're conversing with others, it's very important to listen, especially when we're the ones that they're having conversations with. So why do you think connection is important in communication?
So you don't do what I did, and you have to repeat yourself. But I'm all set now. Because I'm also going to be running the comments. But yeah, you're right. When it comes to communication, there is the relationship aspect to it. Understanding, knowing a person, and knowing how to put things in context, especially since people come from different cultures and backgrounds. There's some sensitivities that may apply to other cultures. That's what immediately comes to mind. Just making sure you have the right relationship, and if not, then you at least have like a professional relationship, or when you communicate, professional type of communication.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. I definitely agree with what you said, because in order for us to establish relationships with anyone in this world, right? Whether if it's at work or our personal lives or even acquaintances or getting to know others or even talking to strangers wherever we are in public, we do have to also be mindful of not only how we speak to them, but also even the little things like our gestures when it comes to communication. Now with EJ and Tony, who are also joining me tonight, is now since Nathan did share with us the importance of connection when it comes to communication, why do you think this is valuable in establishing relationships with others?
Well, I saw that, Tony. That's, like
Nose goes. For those who didn't see, I did nose goes.
yes, communication, first of all, is like a very, a very, very important part of, like being part of society. Like you can't really go on with your life without, communicating with other people. So like building, like that connection, that relationship is, of course, like a very, very um important to know to have, because just because of how important communication is, right, in our, like in our day to day, even in our day to day lives,
Yeah.
I'm going to demonstrate communication right now, and I want to clarify what you're looking for with this question, Melvi. So, what you were asking me is, and everyone is, why is connection like between two people important, even as you're like you're conversing with each other, like being able to have that connection, because the opposite of that would be disconnect, right? Like if I
Absolutely.
didn't understand your question, I wouldn't even be able to answer you properly, correct?
Yes.
So I think that kind of,
We're doing
yeah,
it right now.
we're doing it right
right?
now, yeah.
Now that I think I just assume what the question was.
Yeah, was that a nice way of saying you guys were completely off the mark there? You guys are already off on a tangent.
Yes,
Well,
I
what
was
about
testing you. I was testing you.
what about what Ren says, or Brother Ren's from Fort Worth? He says it shows you genuinely care.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. for
Yeah.
sure.
Go ahead, Tony. Finish your answer.
That was it. I just wanted to demonstrate that really quickly, because that's something that I run into when you mention that question, Arnie. Sometimes that connection, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like chemistry, like, because some people might think that we're talking about chemistry when you're talking. Sometimes it's just being able to know, okay, what are you both trying to achieve at a moment? Like, are we both understanding the context of it right now? Do I really understand what you're trying to ask me? Or like what EJ said, am I assuming something out of what you just said? So I feel like even as simple as that, like being on the same page is really important, like
Especially
to
in the
even
modern
connect at
age.
all. So
In the modern age, because you can
for
communicate
sure.
by phone, audio. You could leave a GIF image or GIF image for GIF. That's for a different chat line. But or a text, right? There's so many different modes of communication. And like if you don't have a relationship with someone, you might not understand their intention when they send you something. So, and I've definitely seen like friends like show me texts like, I think they're angry at me. I think they sent me this out of anger. And I was like, well, you don't know. It's just words, and you don't know what their facial expression is, or it's hard to interpret.
I feel like that's why I always add like what do you call it, an emoji like at the end of like my text messages, because I feel like if I don't, then they're just gonna assume that I say it in like a monotone kind of voice, or I say it like like they like, oh, like is it like, oh, he's angry at me like I just forgot to, like, just can't see what what my
Yeah.
facial expression is. Like,
Imagine that. Okay, I'm just visualizing literally everything that you're saying. And can you imagine, even in a text, right, where you don't hear what they're saying, you just actually read it, right? But then for some reason, you are listening to the tone. And just like what Nate said earlier, he mentioned, oh, it sounds like you're mad at me in that context.
I've
So even the way we express ourselves through text messages, it seems like people are tuned in and they already attach a tone to the
it's
text message without really validating what it really means.
it's
Right?
it's yeah, it's like here's like an example. Like my my friend was like joking with me, because he was trying to say, like, oh, this is your fault. But he was saying it in like a joking way. But because he didn't include any smileys, any emojis on it was just plain text. I read that as him like angry at me. So the next time we saw each other, I apologized. I was like, wait, what for? And then I explained to him. I was like, oh no, I was joking. I was like, I didn't hear that. Like, I thought you were mad at me.
See, it's so easy to assume, isn't it? So, between the three of you, be honest, okay? Because I'm also guilty of this. Whenever you have a conversation with anyone, do you 100% invest on the conversation and listen to understand? Or are you prone to listen to respond in a conversation?
Oh no, calling me out, huh? I've been definitely guilty of that. Especially, the more comfortable you are with someone, it's like you're waiting for your turn to speak. I am a lot better though at listening. I'll give it that. Just hearing. I mean, I remember growing up, no one ever brought up that point that people just wait for their turn to listen. It seems like only maybe in the past 10 years people started mentioning that, maybe passive aggressively or on social media posts, that it's not just listening, but actually like processing what you're hearing and waiting for your turn to speak. If you need to speak at all, sometimes you just need to be listening.
Yeah. And so, you know what? I'm guilty too. Sometimes it's just really hard, especially when you're either in a hurry or you're in a time constraint, for example, and somebody happens to stop you. And you're like, you don't want to be mean and say, look, I know it's important, but I really got to go. So you're trying to listen, but at the same time, your mind is somewhere else. I'm guilty of that too at times. And I do feel bad. So now I've learned to acknowledge it, and actually before the person speaks, I would have to tell them, listen, I'm really sorry, I can't really talk at the moment, but if we can maybe reconvene this later or meet at another time, and that way I can personally listen attentively to what you need to say or what we need to work on. And so, how about EJ and Tony? Do you have any experiences when it comes to, or are you prone? Because when I get excited about like a certain news, I have this tendency to just jump in, stop the person, and I have to apologize. And then I'm itching to again, try to dump in and say a comment, but then sometimes I can't. So I've been doing my due diligence to improve in that aspect.
I would say it like depends on like how, like, if I'm having a conversation with someone even through text and I'm in the middle of something, or like let's say I'm like talking to someone through text, and then like my mom asked me, oh, can you do this, and I go do that. I get tuned out of like the conversation. And see, this is something I gotta work on. Like, I gotta work on not not feeling guilty for not responding right away. Because sometimes I feel like I have to respond right away, and the response that I give sometimes feels like I'm trying to end the conversation. Because I'm trying to give them a response right away, especially if I've already opened their message and then I get asked to do something, and now I have to I have to, okay, like, wait, give me like 10 seconds, I just gonna reply to this. And the reply is I'm sure my friends are pretty familiar with. Like, if it seems that I'm trying to end the conversation by as like a quick reply, it's probably because I got tasked to do something, and I didn't want to be rude and leave you on read. So and it's something I gotta work on. I gotta work on uh like not feeling guilty with not responding right away. Because I'm lenient if someone does that, because I know that they're busy. And so I gotta tell myself, you don't gotta respond right away, because I do want to avoid responding just to respond.
Yeah, because sometimes when you respond, and sometimes they give you that look, like as if you don't know what you're talking about. Because in the first place you weren't really paying attention. And the problem with that is I do notice this, and I think everyone or whoever out there can relate to this, or even you guys, is as they're speaking, I'm somehow rephrasing or trying to already formulate answers to either the questions, or it's one of those, like, I have this rebuttal tendency, and this was a struggle for me in the past, especially when it's like a parent daughter or parent kids relationship, where when my parents were trying to say something and I stopped them and I said, why can't you listen to what I have to say first? And so from then on, I've learned to just either be quiet or not respond, because I feel like they would never give me an opportunity to talk. And so when I'm with my friends, all I want to do is talk. But right now, what we're focusing on is still the receiving end on our part. Tony, do you have any input, or any, or you would like to share with us some of your experiences when it comes to?
I feel like if it's just casual conversation, I have a tendency to dip out easy just because my mind gets distracted by other things, whether it's like something will come up on my phone, or I know somebody's, expecting me to respond with something. And there's a lot of things that kind of grab your attention sometimes in casual conversation. But if somebody makes a point to tell me, like, hey, can I talk to you about something? Or I know that they want to vent about something. If they kind of establish the expectation, like right out the bat, I feel like I'm better in that, like being able to get myself like, okay, this person is trying to share with me something I need to like lock in. But if it's otherwise just like casual conversation that's just like happening, like if we're going somewhere together, we're at the mall, or we're just like hanging out, sometimes I'm not always there. So like you gotta like rein me in a little bit, just because I feel like my mind, there's always so many things on my mind, and I'm always trying to kind of um I'm working more actively now to kind of thin that out a little bit and be more focused in certain things. But as of right now, I know that if it's just casual, if I know there's no intent coming out of the conversation, I don't get to focus as well as if they tell me out the bat, like, can I vent to you about something? I need those, like, not trick, what is the word? Like those cues. I need those cues,
Yeah.
like, hey, I need to, yeah. So just so that it gives my mind like, oh, someone needs something from you, and then I can kind of reframe it that way. But otherwise I'm just
And that's important in communication, though, like to sometimes convey that importance so that, whoever's listening is going to pay attention. Like I saw a few comments, like this one from Renz Diaz. When you get this message, can I talk to you? You're like, uh-oh. And then
yeah,
the other one that Melanie posted, let me see, when it's typing ... and you're waiting. You're like, uh-oh. And you still see that, like, this person's typing, and you just keep going and going and going. You're
It's
like,
scary
oh,
when like it's going and then it stops. And like
yeah.
for a couple minutes it stops and then it goes like, like, oh no, they
And
deleted
it's
what they were
going and
gonna
it's
say.
nothing. It's really
I'm that
nothing.
friend. I'm so sorry. I am that friend.
They
With
But
the
you know
wanted
what?
to
comments,
I
I
have
go
say
on
it.
forever.
Yeah.
I do. Actually, yes, Tony. I have seen you do that. And I'm
I'm
waiting.
so
Wait.
sorry.
Either that or you open up your phone, you're like, whoa, I got 100 notifications. What happened?
Okay, you know what? Tony actually mentioned a really important aspect when it comes to distractions in listening to communication. So she knows her distractions. What about you, Nate and EJ? What are your distractions? For me, I somebody would lose me, like if somebody wants to talk to me and we're either in front of the street, the school bus, or a crowd, or a train, or any
If
street, I can't focus for my life. So I have to tell them, can we move to either a secluded place, a quiet place? Because if I can't hear what you're saying, I won't be able to understand, and we won't have a good conversation. So
if
I'm being honest.
yeah, if we're with no, if we're with other people, like like it's not just me and them. And you also have the like the group that you're with. Like I feel like my attention's kind of split with like with paying attention to like everyone and also paying attention to to what they're trying to tell me. But yeah, like I feel like that for me, that's kind of like what becomes like my distraction. Like if like same with Tony, if they preface it with like, can I vent to you about something, then yeah, like my strategy is, let's I don't know, let's find a corner to to talk, so we're not distracted by it. Because I get distracted easily, because like I'm half paying attention to the group as well in case they say something or they ask me a question. Like I'm half paying attention, so it's hard to keep up with like a serious conversation in that environment. So yeah, if they preface it that they need to, like I need you at 100% for this. I'll be like, okay, let's find a corner to talk, so I can like listen to what you have to say. And it kind of communicates to the group as well that, like you're stepping away to, I don't know, to have a conversation that maybe not forever.
Kind of reminds me of my dad growing up, like when he's working on his car. So like, you're locked into something, your mind is focused on this one thing. And then like you bring something petty up to him, like, hey dad, can I do this and that? And like you break that person's train of thought. Now they're angry at you and you're like, whoa, this person's angry at me. All I was asking was just like a simple question. And that's kind of in line with what you're mentioning, is that you don't know, may not know what's going on, in a person's mind. Maybe they're waiting for a text because someone's been typing for the past, 15 minutes, and they're waiting for the text and they're anxious, and then someone approaches them. So there's also that too. That's kind of like, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to communication, like there has to be kind of that both sides, understanding both sides. And when you have a relationship with somebody, you understand where they're coming from for the most part. Like you know them. Um so like when they seem really upset, you're like, well, it must be a legitimate grievance that, they're upset at me. Otherwise they wouldn't be upset. So there's a little of that too. I mean, that's just tying back into, the importance of having that connection. You fully understand everything, that you're receiving. You will understand if this is a person who sometimes that's how their mind works. They just get locked in on something, and you interrupt them, then they get really upset. That's me.
You have anything to add, Tony? It seems like you're thinking of something.
Well, I was just thinking too that because we're talking about distractions, stuff that distractions being like versus like being focused in. I think another big thing that can kind of affect is your emotion at the moment. Like,
Mhm.
let's say you 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 go to work and you start to have this conversation with your coworker, but prior to that conversation, you had the craziest morning of your life. Like everything was like going wrong. Your car wouldn't start, and then you forgot one of your socks, not your shoes. I was gonna say your shoes. You forgot one of your socks. And you just had all these things going on, and then you come to work, and you're starting to talk with your coworker, and then what they're telling you you're not quite processing because you're still distracted from the whole mess that you had like not even that long ago, and then they start getting upset like, are you even listening to me? And then that escalates into some kind of conflict. So sometimes that stuff happens. I don't know if that happens a lot to you guys, but I've encountered that a lot. A
I
lot
don't
as I got older.
I don't think I've ever forgotten a sock.
Oh yeah, maybe not a sock, but
I
I don't
mean,
know, like
I've worn I've worn two different pairs of shoes before. Like, I mean, but they looked alike. Okay, they looked alike. So I made the mistake because they looked alike. It wasn't until I got to school that I looked down. I was like, wait, these are two different pairs of shoes.
Now, so now we're talking in more in depth of the distractions and our expectations. And I know that you all, actually all of us, mentioned that we're working on this skill. It is a skill. It's a set of behaviors that we need to continuously practice to improve on. Do you guys agree? Absolutely, right? Yes. So I think we're all in agreement that listening to understanding is very, very important, right? Because you don't want to miss out on details. And I'm going to give a few examples, and you guys can chime in, and even the listeners and viewers out there. Number one, when they say listen attentively, right? Whenever we attend, for example, worship services, that's a good example. Or being in a classroom, for example. Imagine if you're there invested, but then you know that you're going to get a quality of your time at the moment, or let's say you're in school, for example, you want to attain your degree. But if you're not going to focus in every subject that you're going to have, you're going to miss out on having good grades, or even miss out on certain informations to bridge the gap between your notes and you listening. Because sometimes I have to take notes. Even when I'm actually conversing with others, even though I don't have pen and paper, I don't know if you guys do this, but I have a tendency now to pick up few keywords. And then when I sit on my desk, and I do this at work, I would jot them down. So during our meeting, when we all get together and they'll ask, okay, who has any questions, who has any concerns or whatsoever, then I would bring up whatever, I can think of, or whatever questions I can formulate based off on what was discussed, let's say in the previous conversations or amongst me and my coworkers, for example. And so when we listen to understand, it also helps build that connection with others, whatever relationship that may be. Now, my question to you guys right now is, what was the hardest conversation you've ever had in your life that you really struggled to listen, or to even pay attention, or be even in that conversation? Do you have any experiences? Mine
Uh,
would be mine would mine usually it's with my parents, because I struggled before in the past to express myself. And growing up, I was just a quiet, kid. I didn't know. I usually would just bottle up my emotions. So I would just sit there, I would listen, try to listen, but honestly, I'm not really listening. I'm just distracted by so many thoughts. Mostly because I've got my own internal battles within me. And so finally, growing up, I've realized that it's so important to connect, not only through conversations, not only through improving our communication skills, but also understanding and having that empathy, that if you can just put yourself in someone else's shoes as well. I mean, you don't even have to agree, really. You just have to learn to also embrace each other's differences to be able to connect. And I know, like Nate, you're already married. You can relate to this, where I'm sure, there's no perfect relationship in the world, but you and your wife, I'm sure, there will be times where even if you bicker at each other, you're like, you're not listening to me. No, but I'm listening to you, but you're not the one listening to me. Right? That type of, you know, conversation, for example. And I've done that too with some of my friends, where we're just, bickering back and forth, instead of just sitting down and acknowledging your own faults, and
Yes.
also holding yourself accountable, so that way you can continuously improve your relationship as well as your own shortcomings.
I think when it like the example you're giving, I think it's when that's when emotions are high, right? Like when your emotions are high, it's like you're both focused on just uh just relaying the information and not really receiving like any of it at the moment. It's kind of like the like the entrance is closed, but the exit's like wide open. You're trying to like just say what is it that you're feeling at the moment. It's not until you take a break from that conversation, you kind of just like you go into your own corners, right? You sit down and you think, and that's when you start to process what they've said in that conversation. Because I know that from experience, where like at the moment it becomes like kind of like like what I was saying, like just this battle of just this is what I want, this is what I want. This is like this is how I feel, this is how I feel. Right? You're not really, you're hearing it, but you're not processing what they're saying, because you're like for me, I'm in the middle of like I'm like like this close to like what I'm feeling. It's all I'm seeing at the moment is how I feel at that moment. It's not until like after we've had that conversation and I'm off somewhere, I sit down, I think, I'm like, they were making sense in what they were saying. And there were times where I question myself, like, why didn't like we were like we wanted the same things, just just it was just because at that moment we were too emotional. We didn't see that we wanted the same thing, right? We wanted to get along again. But because like we were focused on like what the cause of the fight was in the first place, that or and how it made us feel, that we weren't able to communicate that, or not really communicate, we weren't able to understand what each other was saying, which was, let's just burn the hatchet. Is that like the saying? Let's just burn the hatchet and like get along. Like it's not after the conversation that sunk in. Like we wanted the same thing, but we just just because of like the emotions were high at the moment, we weren't able to communicate that with each other. Right? And that's like what kind of like what I was getting with what you're saying. Like it made me think of that. Like when those emotions are, and this is not just with your friends, like we had said earlier, with your parents as well, right? If you're especially, I would say, like in the teen years, like that's, I feel like that's, for me, that's when like my emotions were the highest. Like everything felt so serious. Like every emotion was just like, this is 100% the truth. That's like how it felt at that moment, and like it's not after, right? So even with my friends now, this is what I like. This is what like we try to do is like when it starts to get like too intense, is yeah, right, what, we might need to, I know, we might need to to kind of like stop talking for for a couple, maybe a couple hours, like let the emotions kind of cool down, and then we'll come back to this later, see how we feel about it. Right?
That's so crazy that, okay, I won't say it's crazy. I don't want to invalidate your experiences, but it's like it's it's the opposite for me, just because I feel like the hardest conversations that I've had to have, because I feel like it's really easy to have emotional conversations. Like when you're intense with someone, it just comes out. I feel like the stuff that's really difficult, like with intention, is when you have to tell somebody like difficult news, or you have to tell them difficult information. Speaking a little bit to what Arnie put in the chat, I don't know if you're going to show that one, Nate, where she was like, where it ends with like, it's not you, it's me. Like when you have to tell somebody that like you don't share the same feelings that they do, or when you have to have that conversation with a friend, like, so this is something that you did that really hurt my feelings. Like those are, they are hard in a different way. Like it is hard to be emotionally like at wits with people, or to have that charge of emotion, or frustration or anger or what have you. But it's also equally hard to be able to tell people those things, because you don't know what the reaction is going to be, and of course you don't want to like hurt the other person, but by sharing that information, but you just know that it's unavoidable. So that's what it's been for me. Less about the emotionally charged conversations, but the conversations where I have to be the bearer of like news that I don't want to that I don't want to admit, or that I don't want to say, just because it feels so difficult to even bring it up.
Is it because I think you're like consciously, you're like you were already able to process it, but like they won't, like, that's, especially if that's the moment that they're just finding out, that they're not gonna be able to process it yet.
I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what you guys think about that. What makes it difficult for you, like being able to tell someone difficult news? Like, I think for me, it's just the idea of the potential to hurt another person
Mm.
is always like there, like, and you're not in control of that, right? Like when those conversations happen, like you are in control of, like, saying mean things. That's that's one thing. Maybe when your anger is up there, like you're in control of that. But like actually telling someone like, oh, I understand that you like me, but I'm sorry, I don't share. Like, for some reason that is so hard to say, and
Is it
it's
disappointment then? Like disappointing another person?
maybe. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but it's just that idea of, like, you don't know what the outcome is gonna be. Because when you're frustrated with each other and you're arguing, the outcome is like currently you see it like unfolding there.
Yeah, you're
Whereas
not
when,
you're not
yeah,
listening. Like,
like,
that part is just like jabbing each other with
yeah,
words.
it's just
That's
there.
it.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, that's me personally. The conversations that have been difficult for me are always the uncomfortable. Like, you don't want to have this conversation, but you know that it has to happen, because if you don't, it's just gonna, yeah,
I find that necessary though, like as I get older, because
yeah,
you have to encounter a lot of mature life events, loss of friends and loved ones. I was an assistant manager at one point, and I remember being in the meeting where we're telling somebody that we're firing them, and it's like that's pretty intense. But at the same time, it's like, well, I need to be able to do this because as I get older, you have to start facing, you know, some pretty heavy realities in life. So I would advise like not really running away from them, but you really have to face these things head first as you get older and be prepared. And it's like this is a part of life. Unfortunately, you gotta take everything in, the good and the bad. Um, yeah, Melvie, you were mentioning earlier because I'm married. It's like, yeah, we have some major league arguments when you're married, especially when both the husband and wife are kind of like type A type personalities. Then yeah, we definitely get into arguments. But at the same time, it's communicating, it's admitting when you're wrong, it's everything we talked about, like taking time to slow things down, to breathe, to hear what the other person is saying, to hear what yourself is saying. Like sometimes in the moment, you're like, I don't want to be this person that's like angry. Like I feel bad
Yeah.
for the things I'm saying, like in this moment. So I just find that like if you keep an open mind and you reflect on how you communicate in the past, maybe you hurt somebody, like you don't try to shrug it off and say it's not it's not me, it's that person. You just want to send the blame to somebody else. Like that's part of being mature. It's like,
It's
okay,
still
I
you. It's still you. It's still what's in your mind. You said it because you were thinking it. It's not like someone ran up to you and just like shoved that information in your head. Right? It's still you because you were still thinking it right when you said it.
oh, I mean, we're likely to. I find that I'm less and less likely to say things that immediately come to my mind. Like I would slow things down, and with like sending a text. That's why they say professionally, like if you're emotional, you type something out, you write it out, and then you sit there and you read it and you reread it. You're like, do I really want to send this? And then maybe you want to edit it. Maybe you want to break, come back to it. Because I've definitely done that. I've definitely unsent messages. Like I don't mean to say this. I don't want to send this information and not be able to take it back in the future because it may set this communication on a completely different course, and then you're going to have to do a lot of damage control at that point.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we utter every word that's on our heads or on our minds? Can you just imagine if we have no filters, we just say and blab whatever we want to say, whatever we think at the moment and the wrong time, and just what you mentioned, Nate. Once the damage is done, it's done, and that's the worst part with communication and also listening to understand is the minute you release the word, there's no retracting it. Once you hurt someone, you're also hurting yourself. And now I know that we've geared more towards our own experiences when it comes to us really doing our best to listen, to understand. Now let's flip it the other way. Let's flip the switch now. How do you make others listen to what you're saying? And especially if it's a very important conversation. Like what you said earlier, Tony, you're very uncomfortable, telling, let's say, a guy, I don't feel the same way, for example. I I never really had that problem. It's because I just tell them, listen, I don't want to waste your time. If and when I don't feel anything, it's just me, but we can definitely be friends. And maybe, just maybe, something might spark. But at the moment, and if they're already expecting something, then I am now one to communicate my emotions, because I don't want that person thinking, or basically leading them on to something that they're expecting when there's really nothing in there. And just like Nate also mentioned earlier, as we get older, as you get older, you'd be surprised how controlled you are when it comes to your actions and reactions to different situations, because as you experience more different circumstances in life, these experiences are what teach you, or teach us, to be a better person. And when the time comes, we're now thinking, okay, this is not the person I want to become. This is not the kind of things, these are the kind of words that I don't even want to say. If before I was reckless, if before I was young and I had no filter, or I was just getting carried away with my emotions, now it's one of those things that you look back and say, wow, these experiences really taught me. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. It's still hard for me sometimes, especially at work, because there are coworkers of mine that are really difficult to work with. And can you just imagine the conversations we have to face with each other every time we have meetings, because they just don't want to meet in the middle. And I would have to tell them, I completely understand how you feel. We don't need to be friends. We don't need to get along. But at the end of the day, we still need to get work done, because it's a team effort after all. Is there any chance you can still work with me here? So now, how do you guys react to people who you really want to work with or talk to, especially the people that we care about, and you want to convey something that's important to them, but it seems like they're either off-putting, or they're giving some cues that they don't want to listen. How do you guys make them listen?
This comment there in live chat actually sums it up pretty nicely. She said that timing is everything. Consider if they're at work or if they're stressed or preoccupied, because that's the thing. You you can't make someone care about what you have to say for and that's something I'm learning to accept. And them not being available to listen to me at the moment, is it doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them care. It doesn't mean that they care less about me if they're not able to be there at that. And it's something that I'm learning to accept. If especially if they're I'm really grateful to uh, if they also take the time to reassure me as well. They don't have to, but when they take the time to reassure me, uh, I want to respond to what they're saying, but I'm busy at the moment. So, is it okay if I can just come back to this later? If they reassure me like that, I know it makes me feel a lot better. But even if they don't, even if they just read it, they just leave me on read, or this is easier to do through text message, I think, because yes, it's easy to do it like that. I don't exactly know how you can do that like face to face conversation. I can't think of a way that to make that work. But through if you're just messaging them, I feel like that's one way that it makes it just a little bit better, right? Even if, and it's just internally, just in myself, it's like them not responding doesn't make them like a bad person, because I've been that person as well, where someone vented to me, and I didn't know what to say, and I felt bad for not knowing what to say, or how to comfort them, what to tell them. Like I felt bad for not, and it took me a while before I was able to respond to them, you know, and so just putting myself in their shoes. Maybe they're not ready to hear it, they're not ready to respond to it. That's okay, that's okay. It doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them less caring about me, because I already know who they are, right? They're my friend. They're like my family, if they're family members, right?
Well, sometimes they just need someone to vent on. And what we have to do on our part is just listen. Now, unless, of course, they ask, okay, EJ, I really need your help or advice on this. What do you think? But if they're just, venting and they want to continue to express, sometimes that's all a person needs. Because even I myself experienced that. When I just need someone to talk to, I need someone who can listen to me and just like let me be and just talk until I'm exhausted.
I need
And
to learn.
I feel better.
Funny you brought that up, because I'm still learning how to not immediately go into problem solving, because I feel like I do that though. Like when
Yeah,
they're
that's like
venting
a
to me,
male female mind kind of divide.
like when someone tells me their problem, like my mind immediately goes to like trying to solve their problem. But like you said, Malvi, sometimes they just want to be heard. They just want someone to vent to, and that's something I'm like still like actively trying to tell myself every time someone's venting and I start listing out possible solutions. I tell myself, okay, stop. Like, did you ask them if they want the solution, or did you or maybe they just want someone to listen to them at this moment? Because I feel like it makes them feel awkward when I try to immediately solve like their problem, right? So yeah, like sorry, when you said that, it made me think of that, because I still I still cringe at myself reflecting on conversations before where they were clearly venting to me, and I immediately went into like problem solving mode.
Yeah, you're already thinking of what to do while they're still talking. There's our tendency to just rebuttal even in our heads. It's one of those sometimes bad habits, but we just shake it off and focus or refocus our mind to the conversation in front of us. And Nate, I know that you also have a kid. I'm just curious. So let's say your son needs help and he wants to talk to you, or even when you're disciplining him, how are your reactions or interactions with each other when it comes to your conversation? And is your son really receptive when it comes to what you're saying?
Wow. Okay. So, well, as a parent, you do have to shape, your children. You ultimately, the parent, are ultimately responsible for what happens to that child, and you really need to take that responsibility upon yourself. Don't give it to a babysitter. Definitely don't give it to a public school. Like, put that responsibility on yourself. And I remember when I was a teacher, I remember when the class was not going well and I had someone observing me, they told me, like, you need to get like visibly angry and upset, because I'm notorious for like really staying cool under pressure. Like, just, I'm not worried, and I don't look like I'm worried about anything. And I work really, really well under pressure. But that was a really big lesson that I had to learn. It's like my physical appearance is also a way to communicate. And so with my son, if he does something minor, I may not think it's that big of a deal. I know that I need to correct his behavior. And so I have to act like I'm angry. Maybe he's listening right now. He'd be like, so it was all an act? Well, some of it was an act, yeah. Some of it was genuine. But that's important too. Like, you need to also convey physically when something is important, especially when you're not good at that. Or you don't think it's that important. Because I'll hear people bring me problems, and I'm like, that's not a real problem. But to them, that's a real problem. We're not all the same, and we're all on different paths in life. So I shouldn't just like brush someone's problems off. Same with my son. Like, Oh, that's not a problem. You're a child. You don't have bills. You don't have taxes coming up. You don't have anything really to worry about. You have to balance that as a parent though, where you want to mold them the right way. You want to make sure that you curb bad behaviors and you set them on the right path. But at the same time, sometimes you do need to tell them like that's not that big of a deal. Kind of like when some children fall, you're like, you're not that hurt. Stop crying. And they realize it. They're like, oh, I'm not that hurt. I'm just crying because I'm expected to cry when this happens. So yeah, there's a lot to be a parent. But one thing, if I were to wrap everything up, is like really be mindful about everything you do. Don't let your emotions let you say things outrageous, say things that you might regret as a parent, do things that you might regret. Always be in that parental mindset that like, okay, what I'm about to do, what I'm about to say to my child, I want to make sure that they learn this lesson out of this and it sets them on the right path.
Wow. I'm lost for words on that one. That was a mic drop. Drop for right there. It made me realize some situations and play it in my head while I'm listening to you at the same time. Tony, do you have any comments, EJ, with what he said? Did any of it resonate with maybe your experiences in life as well?
And it made me think of my parents now, like physically, like what you said, like physically showing that you're, because my parents are also like, they're the type to be like, like if someone like, let's say, someone gets in line to them, or like they're also the type to be like really relaxed about it, like, oh, it's fine. Like, but when I do something wrong, like, like I did something wrong, like, hey, like this is something I've done, I'm not proud of it as a kid. I've definitely hit another kid, like seeing them like react, like hey, like get angry, like yell, like I feel like I'm thinking now I've made that's also what they were doing, like they were also playing it up, so that like like me as a kid was able to be disciplined in that way, where it's like, oh, okay, if I do that it makes them angry, don't do that. That being, like being hitting another kid. Like it like it makes, yeah, no, and it's it fascinates me because that's another way of like communicating, right? It's a non-verbal way to communicate a message, right?
I have to tell a story about my son
Yes.
now. I'm gonna put him on the spot.
Did I freeze?
One time I was picking him up from the after school thing, and he had gotten in trouble. And they were like, okay, your son did this. He dropped his pants. So, and then like they brought that up to me. And I'm physically trying not to laugh because I find that hilarious. When my son sees that, he's like, oh, it's entertaining. He goes and does it the next day and gets in trouble again. And I told my wife, I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry, but I cannot be the one to reprimand my son because that's just hilarious to me. So yeah, just put a little cherry on top to what we were talking about. Like your physical appearance does matter, especially if you're like you're being sarcastic to somebody, like very disrespectful.
Yeah, kids are, sponges. They absorb everything. It's the little thing. And you make that one mistake, it's over. And yes, I have had my own personal experiences when it comes to that. So, but you're absolutely right. We have to be mindful of what we say, how we do, even just the physical cues. Okay. So I had one boss in the past where when he talks to people, he's like this and he won't even look at you. So I'm like, we need to talk. This is important. And I can't get him to listen. So I feel like just all right. So he's doing whatever and I'm talking, talking, talking. Well, years later I end up, leaving that job anyway and got a better job after that because I just couldn't stand it. He was just plain rude. I don't know if he thought it was just okay. I did tell him that it's not okay. I mean, I literally asked him, "Is there any chance you can just look at me because I feel like you're not listening?" He goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm listening," as he's typing just in the computer. And your body language can tell people things, and it'll be basically your cue whether you're listening or not. Because if you're facing someone, when they're listening is because you're making eye contacts. Your body is facing the other person. Or even if, let's say, you're seated in, like me for example, in a cubicle, when somebody comes up to me, I would turn my chair and I would look at the person in the eye, and then we'll have a conversation. And then, but, or if there's, like, let's say it's a time constraint, for example, and I'm really, really, I need to finish a work, for example, because I'm on a deadline, then I would excuse myself. But as I'm excusing myself, I'm now also showing some some gestures that I'm slowly slipping away from the conversation. I don't know if you guys have to do that sometimes, because some people just won't stop talking. They can't get the hint. And so sometimes it hurts for me to do the fact that I have to be frank with them and say, listen, I understand you want to talk some more, but I really need to finish this report and I'm running out of time. Can we continue this some other time? And of course they would understand it. But again, it's all about how we say things. It's all about how we react, how our everything, the words we say, our physical actions and whatnot. Now, before we close and we're running out of time, do you guys have any last either tips or maybe not necessarily advice? I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners out there learned a lot from our conversation tonight. So, any last words to anyone?
I just want to say really quickly, one, don't assume anything going into any conversation. Don't assume anything about the person. Don't assume anything about what you know about them, even if you're friends with them, even if they're your family members. Don't assume, because you don't know what they've gone through going up to that moment that you decided to talk to them. And then secondly, like I think it was Nate that said it earlier, don't try your best to not let your emotions drive your intention of what you're trying to do. Like, don't say stuff because you think that that's going to achieve something because you're trying to get a reaction, or because, um, try to do things with intent that makes sense, if that makes sense. Yeah.
How about you guys? You, EJ and Nate. Any
Go. Practice cutting off conversations with like telemarketers or people who try to hand you stuff at the store. Be like, nope, bye, and just that'll help you long term in getting really blunt and to the point when someone's really insistent on something. So that's my advice.
How about you, EJ?
Just want to reiterate what I said earlier about like if you're the one trying to communicate with someone and they seem like unavailable at the moment. I hope that you don't hold that against them, because like at times that could be you as well. Like there could be a time where you want to listen, you want to hear what they're about to say. You want to hear what they're telling you, but it's just that you can't at the moment because you're in the middle of something, right? Or you're already emotionally stressed at that moment, so you're not able to take in more information, right? That could be you as well. You could be in their shoes where you want to listen, but for some reason you just can't, right? So if like if you're trying to talk to someone and they're not able to talk to you, don't hold that against them, right?
Yep. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, EJ. Thank you, listeners and viewers. And we hope to see you again next week. We're here every Friday night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we always have conversation that matters. We hope that you hope we'll see you next week. Bye. And thank you. And think before you act.
Let me always live.